At 5:30 hours, Jack Morrison's internal clock kicked in like it had every morning for 26 years, 6 in the Army, 20 in civilian IT. No alarm needed. His body knew the drill. Coffee first, black as motor oil. Then the ritual. Check overnight alerts on his phone while the ancient Keurig wheezed to life in his cramped kitchen. The apartment wasn't much. 1 bedroom in Clayton, Missouri, 10 minutes from downtown St. Louis. Louis, but it was clean, organized, functional. Military precision in civilian packaging. On his kitchen counter sat 2 framed photos. Sarah at her Purdue graduation ceremony last spring, grinning in her engineering cap and gown, and his old Signal Corps unit from Fort Gordon, 1999. 7 young soldiers who thought they could fix anything with enough cable and determination. Most mornings, the overnight alerts were routine. Database backup completed. Server health optimal. Network latency within parameters. But this morning, something felt different. Not in the systems, those hummed along with the reliability he'd built into them over 14 years, but in the office politics that surrounded them like static interference. Jack Morrison, 47, Senior Architect of Distributed Continuity Solutions. The title was corporate nonsense, but the work was real. He kept the lights on. He made sure the money flowed. When Fortune 500 companies needed their transactions processed at 3 in the morning on Christmas Day, his systems delivered. No downtime, no excuses, no glory. He'd learned that mindset in the Army, debugging communications networks while mortars fell in Kosovo. Systems fail, people panic, missions fail, his old sergeant used to say. Your job is to be this guy who doesn't panic. 20 years later, that lesson still applied. Different battlefield, same principles. At 6:47 hours, Jack poured his second cup into the same ceramic mug he'd carried since 2009. Chipped, stained, sacred. On the side, faded text, 99% uptime club. People at the office used to laugh at it. Not anymore. They'd learned to respect the man behind the mug. The drive to the office took him past the Mississippi River, where barges hauled grain and steel like they had for a century. Reliable, predictable. No pivot strategies or paradigm shifts, just steady progress toward a clear destination. Jack appreciated that kind of honesty. Inside the office, the early morning quiet was his favorite time. Before the marketing meetings and culture syncs, before Chad showed up with his ring lights and energy drinks, just the steady hum of the server room and the faint click of keyboards from the handful of engineers who still believed in showing up before the rest of the world woke up. His workstation occupied a corner cube in what used to be the senior engineering pod. Now it was just him. Dante from infrastructure had taken a new opportunity in Denver. Melissa from QA had decided to explore passion projects in Portland. Ben from security was pursuing growth in Austin, corporate speak for getting out while they still could. Jack understood. They'd been through 3 acquisitions, 2 recessions, and countless midnight war rooms together. They'd held the line when the payment processors went down during Black Friday 2019. They'd kept the customer data flowing when the HVAC failed, and they had to cool the servers with box fans and prayer. They'd earned their stripes the hard way, debugging production systems at 0300, while the rest of the company slept peacefully, trusting their work. But trust was a luxury the new management couldn't afford to acknowledge. Not when they had fresh perspectives and innovative approaches to consider. At 8:47 hours, Jack's phone buzzed with the notification that would change everything. Email from corporate, organizational realignment update, confidential. He didn't need to open it. The preview text told him everything, supporting scalable growth initiatives through strategic workforce optimization. He opened it anyway. Military training. Always confirm your intelligence, even when you already know it's bad news. Salary reduction, 40%. Effective immediately. New reporting structure, transition advisor to Chad Emley, VP of Client Continuity. Office assignment, flexible workspace arrangement. Transition timeline, immediate integration with new leadership vision. Jack read it twice. Then he forwarded it to his personal email and archived the original. No anger, no shock, just the calm acceptance of a soldier who'd learned that complaining about orders didn't change the mission. Chad Emley, 25 years old, CEO's son. Remote MBA from some online program that probably taught disruption theory and viral marketing strategies. His LinkedIn was full of motivational quotes about grinding and hustling. His TikTok featured sneaker unboxing videos and gym selfies with captions like crushing Monday vibes and leveling up the energy. The same Chad Emley who'd mispronounced Kubernetes in last month's all-hands meeting. Who'd asked if they could just migrate everything to the cloud without understanding that their hybrid infrastructure supported $11? $3 billion in annual revenue. Who'd suggested they rebrand their core database clusters with more relatable names because Taylor Swift nodes would be so much more approachable than boring old server designations. Jack closed the email and took a sip of his coffee. Still bitter, still necessary. Through the glass wall of his cube, he could see the skyline of downtown St. Louis stretching toward the Mississippi. The Gateway Arch caught the morning sun like a steel rainbow, connecting the past to the future with simple, elegant engineering. Built to last, no pivots required. At 9:12 hours, his phone rang. Sarah, calling from her dorm at Purdue. "Hey Dad, just wanted to say thanks again for the tuition payment. I know 28 grand is a lot, but this mechanical engineering program is incredible. Professor Martinez says I've got real talent for systems design." Reminds him of the old school engineers who built things to last instead of building them to break. Jack smiled for the first time that morning. "That's good to hear, sweetheart. You keep working hard. Your old man's proud of you." "Love you, Dad. Don't let those corporate idiots get you down, okay?" If only she knew. After they hung up, Jack did the math. Sarah's tuition, $28,000 per year. His mother's assisted living facility, $3,200 per month. His ex-wife Lisa's agreed-upon support, $1,200 per month. Total annual obligations, $80,800. His current salary could handle that with room to spare. His new salary, cut by 40%, would leave him choosing between his daughter's education and his mother's care. Some things were worth more than a paycheck. Some things were worth everything. At 9:55 hours, Jack opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small notebook. Black cover, no markings. Inside, written in his precise military handwriting, were the documentation and access codes for every critical system in the company. Not the official documentation. That lived in corporate wikis that could be edited or deleted. This was the real knowledge. The kind you earned through years of midnight emergencies and weekend fixes. He flipped to the back page, to a section marked Contingency Protocols. Empty until now. Jack Morrison had spent 14 years building systems that didn't fail. This morning, he began planning his first deliberate failure. Mission parameters were clear. Execution timeline would be determined by enemy action. Some battles chose you. This one he'd chosen for himself. The first all-hands meeting under Chad's leadership was scheduled for 10 hours the following Tuesday. Corporate called it a culture alignment session. They lured people in with catered breakfast burritos and biodegradable coffee cups, the usual combination of greenwashing and guac that passed for employee engagement. Jack arrived at 9:55 hours and positioned himself at the back of the conference room, leaning against the wall beneath a motivational poster that proclaimed, "Wellness is winning." He watched the younger employees file in, tablets and phones ready to live tweet their excitement about the new direction. Most of them had been hired in the last 2 years, after the company's Series C funding round. They spoke fluent startup and treated every meeting like a TED Talk waiting to happen. The veterans were harder to spot now. Dante was gone. Melissa was gone. Ben was gone. The few remaining members of the old guard sat quietly in the middle rows, coffee cups full, expressions carefully neutral. They'd learned to survive by becoming invisible. At 10:30 hours, Chad Emley made his entrance. He walked into the room like he was headlining a Netflix startup documentary. The kind where nobody knows what the company actually does, but everyone claps anyway. Hair stiff with product, sneakers glowing white against his precisely distressed jeans. He bounded onto the makeshift stage with the kinetic energy of someone who'd never experienced genuine consequence. "Morning, rock stars!" Chad grabbed the wireless microphone with both hands, grinning like a fraternity pledge with a trust fund. "Call me C-Money, that's what my squad calls me." Actual finger guns. 2 of them, aimed at different sections of the audience. The younger employees laughed on cue. The older ones maintained their poker faces. "Today we're going to revolutionize how we think about customer engagement paradigms." Chad clicked his remote, and the first slide appeared. A rainbow gradient background with the title Viral Flow Architecture in Comic Sans Fond. We need to shift our mindset from boring old reliability to exciting new relatability. Jack took a sip of his coffee. Still bitter, still necessary. Chad clicked to his next slide, Generation Z Loyalty Curves. It featured 3 bullet points, each punctuated by fire emojis. Tap into authentic vibes. Build sustainable hype. Create shareable moments. See, the thing about our current infrastructure, Chad continued, pacing the stage like a motivational speaker, is that it's all super technical and intimidating. Like, who even knows what a Kubernetes cluster is, right? Jack's jaw tightened. 3 people in the audience did know what Kubernetes clusters were because they'd spent months configuring the orchestration that kept Chad's father's company profitable. So I've been working with our amazing design team to rebrand our core systems with more approachable names. Instead of boring server designations like DB Primary 01, why not call them something fun, like Taylor Swift or Beyonce or The Rock? Fresh names, fresh vibes. Someone in the back row coughed. An intern muttered, "Oh no," under her breath. Chad clicked to his next slide and Jack's blood pressure spiked. It was his architecture diagram. 14 years of work, stripped of credits and context, slapped into a Canva template with dancing dog gifs and headers that read "Fast Path to Customer Smiles." His carefully designed redundancy protocols had been relabeled as happiness backup systems. His disaster recovery procedures were now sad to glad migration tools. Jack didn't flinch. He pulled a pen from his shirt pocket and started sketching geometric patterns on the back of his handout. Triangles pointing inward. Pressure relief techniques he'd learned in the Army. Questions? Chad spread his arms wide like he'd just revealed the cure for cancer. Jack's hand went up. When you say paradigm shift, are you referring to failover routing protocols or just the dancing mascots? Chad blinked twice, then laughed. Both, I guess. Innovation everywhere, right? That's the beauty of thinking outside the box. The intern next to Jack whispered, "This is painful." Follow-up question. Jack continued, his voice level and professional. Have you tested the renamed nodes against our legacy monitoring scripts? Because most of our alerting systems use regular expression pattern matching based on standardized naming conventions. Chad's smile flickered. That sounds like technical debt we should probably just, modernize. Legacy thinking is what holds us back from true disruption. Jack nodded once and put his hand down. Around the room, he caught the eyes of other senior engineers, the ones who understood that technical debt wasn't just a buzzword, but the accumulated weight of real decisions made by real people solving real problems. The meeting wrapped with forced applause and Chad's double thumbs up exit line. "Let's go build some viral uptime, warriors." As people filtered out, Jack remained against the wall, watching the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The gateway arch still stood, unchanged by corporate rebranding initiatives. His manager found him there 10 minutes later. Janet held the title of Director of People Operations. She used to be called Head of Engineering before the consultants arrived. She wore her HR smile like body armor. "Jack, can we chat?" Her voice carried the careful modulation of someone delivering rehearsed bad news. "We need you to support Chad's transition. Build some redundancy into your role, Mentorship opportunities." Jack looked her straight in the eye. "What kind of redundancy are we talking about?" "Well, Chad's going to need access to your documentation, your processes. Maybe you could create some knowledge transfer materials?" "All my processes are already documented," Jack said. "Standard operating procedures, disaster recovery protocols, security guidelines. Everything's in the engineering wiki." "Right, but Chad mentioned that some of the language is pretty technical. Could you maybe simplify it, make it more accessible?" Jack nodded slowly. "Sure, I can make it accessible." That afternoon, he sat at his workstation and opened 2 documents simultaneously. On his left monitor, the official engineering wiki with its sanitized procedures and corporate-approved language. On his right monitor, his personal notebook transcribed into a text editor containing the real knowledge. The undocumented dependencies, the unofficial fixes, the workarounds that kept everything running when the official procedures failed. He began creating Chad's accessible documentation. Simple language, clear steps, no technical jargon. Instructions so straightforward that even a trust fund baby with a Netflix attention span could follow them. What he didn't include were the exceptions, the edge cases, the tribal knowledge that came from debugging systems at 0300 when everything was on fire and Google couldn't help you. At 1847 hours, Jack's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Jackie, the assisted living folks are asking about next month's payment." "Is everything okay with work?" He texted back, "Everything's fine, Mom. Payment will be on time as always." That night, Jack drove home through the quiet streets of Clayton, past the houses with their neat lawns and responsible mortgages. People who worked honest jobs and raised honest families and expected honest treatment from their employers. People who'd never heard of pivot strategies or viral flow architectures. In his apartment, he heated up leftover chili and sat at his kitchen table with his laptop. He created a new folder on his personal drive, Project Redundancy. Not for them, for him. Inside, he began documenting everything they'd need to know to replace him. Not the sanitized version he was creating for Chad, but the real procedures. Every dependency, every gotcha, every late-night fix that had kept their billion-dollar revenue stream flowing. Then he created a second folder, Contingency Protocols. Jack Morrison had spent 20 years in service, 6 to his country, 14 to his company. He'd learned to follow orders, complete missions, and protect the people who counted on him. But he'd also learned something else, something they didn't teach in corporate leadership seminars. Sometimes the best way to protect something is to be willing to destroy it. He opened his notebook to the section marked Access Codes and began typing. The system failures began 3 weeks later, starting small and escalating with the methodical precision of a military operation. It was 1:12 hours when Jack's phone buzzed with Chad's first panicked Slack message. Urgent, node renaming complete. Deployed new config. Vibration Nation. Jack stared at the message from his bed, calculating the cascade of failures that would begin within the hour. Chad had renamed 3 core database clusters without understanding how they connected to 17 different monitoring systems. DB-primary-Taylor-Swift might sound friendlier than DB-prod-primary-01, but Reject's pattern matching didn't care about friendliness. He forwarded the message to his personal email with the subject line Exhibit A and went back to sleep. By 6:30 hours, the first alerts were flooding in. Customer analytics reports were choking on the renamed nodes. Dashboard refresh times had jumped from seconds to minutes. 2 payment processing queues had stalled because they couldn't locate DB secondary not Lana LOL, Chad's attempt at millennial humor. Jack arrived at the office at his usual time, 7 hours, and found chaos in progress. The open workspace buzzed with frantic energy as junior developers refreshed screens and muttered about vendor issues and DNS propagation delays. Chad stood in the center of it all, hands on his hips, projecting confidence like a life vest. "It's just some growing pains," Chad announced to the room. "All major pivots come with temporary optimization challenges." Jack poured his coffee and sat at his workstation. His personal monitoring dashboard, the real one, not the pretty corporate version, showed exactly what he'd expected. The renamed nodes were functional but invisible to legacy systems. Like soldiers wearing enemy uniforms, they couldn't be recognized by their own forces. At 8:47 hours, his desk phone rang. Internal call from the customer support team. "Jack, thank God you're here. We've got 3 Fortune 500 clients reporting transaction delays. The dashboard says everything's green, but their payments are stuck in processing limbo." "I'll take a look," Jack said. He opened his terminal and ran a diagnostic script he'd written during the Bush administration. The output confirmed what he already knew. The monitoring systems were healthy, but they'd lost contact with the renamed database clusters. The fix would take 5 minutes. Change the node names back to their original designations, restart the monitoring services, clear the processing queues. Standard operational recovery. Instead, Jack opened a new terminal window and made a small adjustment to the load balancer configuration. Nothing dramatic, just enough additional routing complexity to slow things down by another 10%. At 11 hours, the executive emergency meeting was called. Jack sat in the back row of the conference room watching Chad present his incident analysis to a room full of executives who didn't know a database from a doorknob. "What we're experiencing," Chad said, clicking through slides full of upward trending arrows and cheerful pie charts, "is a temporary recalibration as our systems adapt to their new, more intuitive naming paradigms." The CEO, Chad's father, leaned back in his chair with the relaxed confidence of a man who'd never personally debugged a production outage. "How long until we're fully optimized?" "I'd estimate 24 to 48 hours for complete integration," Chad replied. "This is totally normal for major infrastructure improvements." Jack raised his hand. "The monitoring systems are showing healthy nodes, but they can't locate the renamed clusters. We could restore full functionality in about 5 minutes by reverting to standardized naming conventions." Chad's smile tightened. "That would be moving backward, not forward. Legacy thinking is exactly what we're trying to evolve beyond." "What's our current uptime percentage?" Jack asked. "Uptime is the outdated metric," Chad said quickly. "We should be focusing on user engagement and positive customer journey outcomes." Jack pulled out his phone and opened his personal monitoring app. "Current system availability is 94.7%. Industry standard for financial services infrastructure is 99.9%. The CEO's tan faded slightly. "Is that bad?" It means we're down about 6 hours per day instead of 6 minutes per year, Jack said. For context, that's the difference between a reliable Toyota and a car that breaks down every time you try to drive to work. The room fell silent except for the hum of the HVAC system and someone's nervous pen clicking. Chad jumped back in. But think about the brand value we're creating. Our systems have personality now. That's worth way more than some arbitrary numbers. Jack nodded once and put his phone away. Understood. That afternoon, 2 more critical systems experienced optimization challenges. The customer portal started timing out during peak hours. The internal reporting dashboard began displaying null values in 5 different languages, each incident individually explainable, collectively devastating. At 16:47 hours, Jack's phone rang. Sarah, calling from Purdue. Dad, I just wanted to check in. You sounded stressed last time we talked. Is everything okay at work? Jack stepped outside into the parking lot, away from the buzzing anxiety of the office. Just some management changes, sweetheart. Nothing I can't handle. You know, Professor Martinez was talking about systems engineering yesterday. He said the best engineers are the ones who understand that every component serves a purpose, even if it doesn't look important to outsiders. He said the most dangerous thing in engineering is someone who changes things they don't understand. Jack smiled for the first time in weeks. Your professor sounds like a smart man. He is. He also said that in the real world, incompetent managers don't last long because reality has a way of exposing them. I thought you might find that comforting. After they hung up, Jack walked back into the building with a clearer sense of purpose. Reality was indeed preparing to expose incompetence. He just needed to accelerate the timeline. That evening, he drove to his old neighborhood in South Street, Lewis, to the house where he'd lived during his first marriage. Lisa still lived there. They'd had an amicable divorce, the kind where you realize you're better friends than spouses. She met him at the front door with a concerned expression. You look like hell, Jack. Thanks, I feel worse than I look. She led him to the kitchen where they'd had 1,000 conversations during their 12 years of marriage. Coffee cups, morning news, shared dreams of financial security and family stability. Sarah called me, Lisa said. She's worried about you. She shouldn't be. I've got everything under control. Do you? Because she mentioned that you seemed different, quieter, more calculated. Jack looked at his ex-wife, the woman who'd known him through 2 deployments, 3 job changes, and the gradual transformation from young soldier to experienced engineer. If anyone could read him, it was Lisa. I'm fine, he said, just dealing with some workplace politics. Jack Morris and I lived with you for 12 years. I know the difference between your workplace politics face and your mission planning face. What are you planning? He met her eyes. Nothing illegal. Nothing that will hurt innocent people. But some things need to be corrected, and sometimes correction requires consequences. Lisa nodded slowly. Just promise me you won't do anything that could hurt Sarah's future. She needs her father's reputation intact. Everything I do is for Sarah's future, Jack said. And for every other kid whose parent works for people who think competence is negotiable. That night, back in his apartment, Jack opened his laptop and navigated to a hidden directory he'd created on the company's legacy infrastructure server. The old system that nobody remembered, buried 3 levels deep in corporate acquisitions and architecture migrations. The one that still held root access to every critical system because it had been grandfathered in during the Series A integration. He uploaded a small script. Elegant code, clean logic, undetectable until activated. A digital dead man's switch that would wait patiently for his command. Tomorrow was the investor demonstration. Chad's big moment to prove that viral infrastructure could generate viral revenue. The presentation that would determine whether the board continued backing the innovative new direction or started asking uncomfortable questions about quarterly performance metrics. Jack Morrison had spent 14 years ensuring that critical systems never failed when people were counting on them. Tomorrow he would demonstrate what happened when people stopped counting on the right things. He closed his laptop, brushed his teeth, and set his alarm for 5 hours. Some missions required early preparation. This one required perfect timing. Demo day arrived with all the manufactured excitement of a product launch crossed with a political rally. The office had been transformed into a television studio, complete with ring lights, branded banners, and a catering table shaped like the company logo. Half-melted pastries sweated under warm LED panels while junior employees practiced their spontaneous enthusiasm for the cameras. Jack arrived at 6:55 hours, 45 minutes before the scheduled investor presentation. He wore his best shirt, the blue one Sarah had given him for Father's Day, and carried his coffee in the familiar chipped mug. To any observer, he looked like a man preparing for another routine workday. He walked past the main staging area where Chad rehearsed his opening lines with a public relations coach and headed toward the back of the building. Past the focus booths and collaboration zones, through a hallway that most employees had forgotten existed, to a gray steel door marked legacy infrastructure. His badge still worked. Of course it did. In Chad's rush to rebrand everything customer-facing, he'd forgotten that the old systems still required old access protocols. The room smelled like warm plastic and electrical ozone, comforting scents that reminded Jack of his army days debugging communications equipment in Kosovo. He sat at the ancient terminal, CRT monitor, mechanical keyboard, tower case humming with fans that had been running continuously since the Clinton administration. Green text on black background, vault relay standby. Jack entered his credentials and navigated to the script he'd uploaded the previous evening. The dead man's switch sat quietly in the system, invisible to modern monitoring tools, waiting for activation. He reviewed the code one final time, checking for errors or unintended consequences. Clean, precise, reversible. Military-grade planning applied to civilian-grade revenge. Video description. Hook, they cut my pay for CEO's son. At 9 o'clock, every server went dark. Tags video. Corporate revenge. Workplace drama, business betrayal, fired from job, true story, narrated story, leadership lessons, corporate culture, comeback, revenge story, Jack Morrison, CEO son, strategic revenge, professional triumph, single point of failure. Battle. Poll question EN. If after 14 years of service your pay was cut 40% for the CEO's son, what would you do? Walk away. No loyalty left. Fight back. Demand fairness. We'll type in the comments. Câu hỏi 6. Nếu sau 14 năm làm việc mà lương bạn bị cắt 40% để dành cho con trai CEO, bạn sẽ làm gì? Rồi đi, chẳng còn lý do để trung thành fan công. Đòi lại sự công bằng. Tôi sẽ viết trong bình luận. At 8:47 hours, he confirmed the payload. All critical monitoring systems would go silent simultaneously. No data destruction, no permanent damage, just strategic blindness. The infrastructure would keep running, but nobody would be able to see it or control it, like a power grid operating without gauges or switches. At exactly 9 hours, the investor presentation began. Jack could hear Chad's voice echoing through the building's speakers. Welcome to the future of customer-centric infrastructure. Today marks a new era of viral reliability and scalable happiness. He pressed enter. The effects were immediate and cascading. Every dashboard in the building froze mid-update. Customer transaction reports stopped refreshing. The real-time analytics that Chad had built his entire presentation around went dark, displaying spinning loading icons that looked like screensavers from 1997. Jack stood up, straightened his shirt, and walked calmly back toward the main office area. The staging area had transformed from confident excitement to barely controlled panic. Engineers rattled keyboards and refreshed browsers while Chad continued his presentation, apparently unaware that his live demonstrations were showing nothing but error messages. The investors, serious men in expensive suits, watched with the patient expressions of people who'd seen many startups fail in creative ways. Someone shouted across the chaos, "Who understands the legacy monitoring systems?" Jack raised his coffee mug. "I might be able to help," he said, "but I'd need to check my documentation." The moment he spoke, the room pivoted toward him like a compass needle finding magnetic north. Chad's face went pale above his designer collar. The CEO looked like someone had told him his golf membership was being revoked. Jack pulled a small flash drive from his shirt pocket. Bold, scratched, labeled RR01 in his careful handwriting. "This contains the restoration protocols," he said. "The system isn't broken, it's just sleeping." The CEO practically lunged across the room. "Wake it up! We'll double your salary." Jack looked at him with the steady calm of a man who'd made his decision weeks ago. "I'll need to review the situation and provide a formal assessment." He walked away from the chaos, past the broken ring lights and scattered pastries, past 2 junior developers whispering into headsets like mission control operators during a failed rocket launch. He sat at his workstation, opened his personal laptop, and began typing. To board at company. Come from Jack. Morrison at personal. Come subject. System restoration services. Final invoice attachment. Restoration_terms_final. PDF. The email body contained a single line. Professional consulting rates attached. Payment terms non-negotiable. The PDF was precise and comprehensive. Emergency infrastructure restoration. System analysis and recovery. $1,500,000. Knowledge transfer and documentation. $750,000 legacy integration. Consulting, $250,000. Equity compensation, 7. 5% vested shares, delivery timeline, 4 hours from cleared payment. Terms, non-negotiable, immediate wire transfer required. Additional terms, all renamed systems restored to standardized naming conventions. Complete organizational chart review for technical competency. Mandatory technical training for all management-level IT decisions. At the bottom, centered in bold, professional services, non-refundable. Jack clicked send and closed his laptop. Through the conference room windows, he could see Chad being escorted toward the exit by 2 security guards, still clutching his tablet like it might reconnect him to relevance. No arguments, no protests, just the hollow stare of someone discovering that consequences were real. At 10:17 hours, Jack's phone buzzed with a wire transfer notification. Full amount, no negotiation, routed through a Cayman Islands account with more zeros than Chad had brain cells. At 10:19 hours, Jack activated the restoration script. Systems came back online like sunrise after a long night. Dashboards populated with real data. Transaction queues cleared their backlogs. Customer service phones stopped ringing with complaints about processing delays. Jack didn't log back into the corporate systems. His employee account had been automatically deactivated upon receipt of the consulting payment, a security protocol he'd written himself years earlier. Instead, he packed his personal items into a cardboard box, the coffee mug, the framed photo of Sarah, his notebook with its handwritten documentation of 14 years of institutional knowledge. By 12 hours, the first consulting inquiry arrived. A Fortune 500 financial services company whose CTO had watched the morning's meltdown through industry networks. They didn't need culture consultants or viral paradigm shifts. They needed someone who understood that reliability was the foundation of trust, and trust was the foundation of business. Jack signed his first independent consulting contract at 13:17 hours. Monthly retainer, no board meetings, no culture syncs. When something broke, he would fix it. When they listened to his recommendations, things wouldn't break. That evening, he sat on his apartment balcony with a blanket across his lap and whiskey in his old coffee mug. The same mug from 2009, chipped and stained and finally earning its keep. Below him, traffic crawled along I-64 like data packets through a well-designed network. Slow but steady, predictable but purposeful. His phone rang at 19:47 hours. Sarah calling from her dorm room. "Dad, oh my God, you're famous!" Professor Martinez showed our class a TechCrunch article about some badass engineer who took down a whole company with a single script. He said it was the most elegant example of systems leverage he'd ever seen. Jack smiled. "That's interesting, sweetheart." What did the article say? It said this guy had been building systems for years, and when management tried to replace him with some incompetent nepotism hire, he basically proved that experience matters more than connections. The professor called it a masterclass in professional vindication. Your professor sounds like he understands the fundamentals. He does, Dad, I'm proud of you. I don't know what happened at your company, but I know you did the right thing. Mom called and said you seemed different, more confident, like you remembered who you are. After they hung up, Jack opened his laptop and created a new document. Legacy Logic LLC, Client Onboarding Procedures. Simple systems for complex problems. Reliable solutions for unreliable situations. No viral strategies required. They used to ignore him because he didn't speak an emoji, because he prioritized function over form, because he showed up to solve problems instead of creating presentations about solving problems. Now they paid premium rates to rent his silence and expertise. He'd never wanted revenge. That was just a tactical necessity. What he'd wanted was recognition that competence mattered more than connections, that systems built by experienced hands lasted longer than systems built by marketing departments. Now he had both professional vindication and financial independence. Clean, quiet checkmate. The gateway arch glowed in the distance, unchanged by corporate rebranding initiatives, still connecting past and future with the simple elegance of good engineering. Some things were built to last. Some people were, too. Jack Morrison had spent 20 years proving that reliable systems required reliable people. Tonight he'd proven that reliable people didn't require unreliable systems. He raised his mug in a silent toast to the skyline, to his daughter's future, to every competent professional who'd ever been told their experience didn't matter in the face of innovation. Tomorrow, he would start building something new, something built to last.